First thing we're going to do is we're going to unwind the warp thread by pulling the side that's between the one loop. You see it here. And it's wrapped around the center of the butterfly. You can shake it out a little bit. Just try to be gentle with it so it doesn't get caught up. It is folded in half already. Notice that one side is longer than the other. You can see here there's a little tail that comes out. One side's longer than the other. Thread the warp using the bunny ear method and place your needle almost in the middle of the warp. So we're just going to go ahead, and this is the bunny ear method. I'm just making a little bunny ear here. And then it's easier to thread the needle. So here it is, it's in that same spot. So you have the warp thread almost in half, but there is a little bit of a tail. Just make sure one side is longer than the other, about 2 feet. And then you're going to take your loom and picture a loom like a wheel. There's actually 23 openings. So if you consider this like spokes on a wheel, now with our warp, we're going to be making spokes on a wheel. And so I'm going to visualize one here, and it's going to go all the way around to 23. So that'll help you to stay on track as you're weaving this. So you're going to come up at point 1 through the opening 1. And you're going to leave that tail about, let's say, 1.5 feet. And you're going to pinch it right here so it stays secure. You've got about 1.5 feet tail hanging out there. And then you're going to count over to opening 13. So this would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And you're going to go down through that opening there. And so now you've almost divided your loom in half. But if you look, really, this side is a little bit bigger than this side. So now you have 2 spokes, believe it or not. Then you're going to come up at opening 2, up through the loom like this. And then you're going to go down at 3. And what's going to happen is that you have to give your warp thread some slack periodically. And what I mean by that is that you need to make your length of warp thread a little bit longer so that it doesn't get caught up in the loom and double up. So you're going to come up at 3. And down at 15. You're going to keep wrapping the warp around in that same way. Up at 4, down at 16. And you're up at 5, down at 17. Up at 6, down at 18. Up at 7, down at 19. Up at 8, down at 20. Up at 9, down at 21. Up at 10, down at 22. Up at 11, down at 23. And we're going to come up at 12. Now you'll notice there's still one warp missing on your wheel. The same with this side. There's one warp missing on both the front and the back. So we're going to secure this last warp thread by tucking it under this triangle shape here. You'll notice this triangle is smaller than all the others, and it's directly across from where you're missing this warp. So you're going to tuck your needle under that spot, pull it up through here. You're going to see all of the threads coming together. And we're going to start to weave right now by picking any warp thread up and weaving down and under, over, under, over, under. Over, under, over, under. And we're going to be continuing to do the same process, going around at least twice. This is going to secure the warp thread and draw all the warps to the center of the loom. After we've gone around twice, we can secure the warp by doing the hitch knot. We're going to take any warp and tie a knot around the warp twice so it stays secure. And for now, we're just going to leave the tail. And we're going to turn it around, and we're still missing a warp thread on this side. But you know what? Because the crystal is fairly large, and we want to make sure we have enough room, before we secure this last warp, we can insert the crystal. So you're going to get your crystal and you just put it right in the center between the two warps, the front and back warps. And you place it really anywhere that you think looks good. Just make sure it's between two. And now we're ready to finish the last warp thread. So we're going to create a little bunny ear with our tapestry needle. We're going to find that small triangle shape that's directly across from where we're missing our warp. We're going to tuck it underneath the warp threads. Put over top the crystal. And you'll notice that the warp threads will start to draw towards the center. And we'll do the same thing by weaving around at least twice. You can go clockwise or counterclockwise. It doesn't matter which way you go. And after you've gone around a few times, at least twice, you can secure the warp thread by wrapping it around the loop with a slip knot. And if you do that twice, it will stay secure. We're going to cut these tails off soon, but for now you can just let them go. Just make sure that these warp tails don't get caught up in your weaving as you start to weave. Now it's time to incorporate the weft. And to do that, you're going to take some of your yarn on your yarn cake and unravel it. Now it's a pretty long piece of yarn, so I would recommend you use half now and half later. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my yarn. I'm going to use a smaller piece of it. And I'm going to start out by securing it. First, I will thread my needle by using the bunny ear approach. It's so much easier to thread the needle. I'm going to go ahead and leave a little tail at the end. Fold it in half a little bit so it's a little less cumbersome to work with. Makes it a little shorter. Now we have warps on the front of a loom and on the back of a loom, and we're going to start to bring those two together by embedding the crystal and weaving around the crystal. So try to get it at an angle where you can see the warps on the front and the warps on the back lining up. So you'll come up through the front. Now instead of using these openings that we were using before, we're going to be using the openings here instead. You're going to weave in and out of these triangular openings. So you can start anywhere. And it's not necessary, but it does help if you secure the yarn in place. Usually just do that by wrapping it around one of the warp threads. And I'm just going to start to weave through the warp threads in the front and on the bottom. Now these tails do get caught, but that's okay. We're going to cut that off very soon. This is called a plain weave or a tabby weave. You're going to come over the warps on one side and under the warps on the other. So here we're taking the weft, not pulling too tight. We want the yarn to rest naturally, kind of like a snake slithering in and out of the forest. You just want it to be naturally swaying in and out. You don't want it too loose, but you don't want it too tight either. And like I said before, it doesn't matter which way you could go. I'm going clockwise because I'm right-handed and that comes most naturally to me, but it doesn't matter if you go in the other direction. Also too, with your crystal, it's an organic shape, so you do have to make design decisions about which way to go. So you might be changing directions as you're weaving. So you might end up going clockwise, but you'll end up going in the reverse direction. So I went around once, and you notice as I'm going around the second time that where I went over is now where I'm going under, and vice versa. You can start to notice that the weft is going an opposite way that it was going before. But if you miss a step or if you didn't end up with that, that's okay. You can just keep going. It really doesn't have to be perfect. You know, this project is great for improvisation, and a lot of times the imperfections really add to the look of the piece. I would say at this point in the project, things start to get easier here on out as you're starting to finish the project. And one of the reasons I love weaving so much is I get into that flow state where time kind of just stops and the busyness of my mind begins to calm down, and I can start to think clearly. And those meditations that we did with Amy, we start to remember those things. And we're breathing deeper, we're taking longer breaths, and it's very cathartic when we're thinking about balancing our chakra and working with these natural fibers and this crystal with the healing energy properties. So if your mind wanders or you start thinking about something other than weaving, that's perfectly okay. All right, now that we've gone around a few times, let's get rid of these tails that are getting in our way. We're going to do that by unthreading the yarn, grabbing the warp thread, and what we're going to do is simply tuck the thread underneath, pull it through like this, and you're just going to cut it off, right? So you don't see it and stays out of the way. And you do the same thing on this side. All right, now it'll stay out of our way. We can use our needle to help push our weft down towards the center. At this point, your crystal is fully embedded into the loom, so it won't fall out. You can also use your fingers to help push the weft down towards the crystal. So I was saying before that madder dye has this deep red color. That's what this wool was dyed with. I guess one of the medicinal qualities of madder is that it is good for the skin. So the sheep that this wool comes from a 70-acre farm in Western New York, and they have an off-grid house. All right, we're getting towards the end of this yarn, but we're just going to keep going to try to fill in this negative space. Going to go ahead and secure this yarn because I'm going to cut it. I'm going to hide the tail by just putting it up through here, and then I'm just going to cut it right off. Same with this. Let's just get this out of the way. And I'm just going to grab my yarn cake and get some more yarn to weave with. I usually, when I thread the needle, I do the same thing where I almost have the yarn folded in half, just so it's a little shorter and easier to work with. So it doesn't matter where I start. I can really start anywhere between any of the wefts, any of the warps, excuse me. I'm just going to secure the yarn to get it started so that it doesn't fall out. Usually what I do to end it is I pull it up through the weft threads like this, pass it through, and simply cut it. Now there's one last thing to do to finish your intention mobile, and that's to weave some yarn around the edge through these openings. So you take your scrap yarn, anything that you have left over from your yarn cake, and you pick any opening, and you're just going to weave around the openings. So there it is. We wove around the edge twice to give it that nice clean line look. We have that on both sides. And this is a mobile. We're going to attach the other chakras to this later on. But this is really it. This is what you can do. If you want, you can tie a knot here on the top. And then you can hang it on a doorknob, on a dresser drawer, on your rear view mirror, in your car, anywhere that it will serve as a reminder to you to think about the intention that you set for yourself. I hope you join me for the rest of the chakra mobile journey as we weave along the chakras.